Again, sorry about that, folks. And here's a great quote that I got. This is the physician to Alexander the Great. When health is absent, wisdom cannot reveal itself, art cannot become manifest, strength cannot fight, and wealth becomes useless, and intelligence cannot be applied. Okay, let's go on to the next one. I thought that was pretty cool. Our webinars usually revolve around three main things. The power of the human body. We know now more than ever before that our bodies have a lot more potential than we give them credit for. And unfortunately, too many people kind of they stumble over that fact so much, and it's like when you talk to them about this nutritional product or this intervention that can help them, they seem to be in total disbelief because it has never been in their realm of experience. Their doctors have never told them that, and so they like I said, they stumble over such things. However, it's not the nutrition itself that usually does the work, it is the body. And so if we can help people understand the way the body works, then hopefully that disbelief will be minimized and they will be able to take better steps towards taking control of their health. Of course, we do need certain things for our bodies. Our bodies do not function on their own, just like a car. It doesn't matter how good the car is. It needs some vital nutrients. It needs vital components to help it work better. And of course, at the same time, we must protect our bodies as we go along. And I have in front of you at the screen here a picture of Dr. Sami. And last week, he did a wonderful, wonderful job with stress and heart health. And really, as he was going along, the whole idea was protecting yourself against emotional stress primarily. And I just couldn't help thinking, folks, that yes, stress is a factor, but sometimes people would leave thinking, well, that's all I need to do. I just need to protect myself from stress. And really, this came to a head when I thought about Dr. Harry, who came about 3 weeks ago. And he did a wonderful presentation again on arginine and the Nobel Prize-winning approach that helps to cleanse and unclog your blood vessels. And we're talking about the cardiovascular system tonight. But he, like I said, he did a great job on with talking about arginine, the nitric oxide pathway. But towards the end of his lecture, I asked him a question. I said, well, where does CoQ10? Many of you know that what that is. It's an antioxidant, but it's also very, very important for muscles, especially the heart muscle. And he said, well, he uses CoQ10. Well, that wasn't in the presentation. And, of course, we asked him to come to present on a specific topic. But, again, people who are just getting into nutrition might leave with the impression that, well, all I need to do is take arginine. Or in Dr. Steve's case, all I need to do is minimize my stress. And what I began to realize was that we need to show people that these are all pieces of the puzzle. Now, they are vital pieces of the puzzle, but they are pieces of the puzzle nonetheless. And so there had to be a full picture. Let's say the cover, the picture that comes with a jigsaw puzzle, the cover has that picture, and it shows you where everything goes. And so I began to think to myself that maybe we should do a class on the cardiovascular system and really show people how everything fits together. Now, that's a tall order, I know, because we only have about an hour and a half at most to do that. But we shall try, and then wherever we'll try and paint sketchy at best. But hopefully you're going to be able to see how these things all fit together. Now, again, when it comes to health, and I like to show this diagram. Some of you have seen it several times. When it comes to health, there are two main approaches, the medical approach on your right side and then the nutritional or the other integrative complementary medicine approach where folk medicine is one of those things. I mean, I come from a part of the world where in many parts of my country they haven't even seen a syringe or a needle before, and so they rely a lot on traditional medicine. And so far they've survived, maybe not too well, but they've survived and they've done well in some cases. And then, of course, on the right side is the medical approach. And listen, I'm going to be the last person, the very last person to slam the medical establishment. If you're from my part of the world and you're over the age of 5, I would say over 80% of people who are over the age of 5 are alive today because of medicine, the traditional, what we call allopathic medicine, and we just have a lot more to deal with. But that said, the problem with this approach is that it focuses solely on the symptom or the disease. Okay, we're talking about the cardiovascular system today, so let's use an example. Let's say cholesterol. The patient walks into the doctor's office. The doctor says you have a high blood cholesterol. Now that's becoming very controversial today, but anyway, let's say he has a high blood cholesterol. What does the doctor do? He throws anti-cholesterol medications at him. Well, let's look at some pictures. Come on. Okay. All right. So let's say these are anti-cholesterol drugs, and so they throw it at the disease. But at the same time, that if it does reduce the cholesterol medication, this doesn't happen 50% of the time, by the way. If it does, it also causes side effects, and those are what these mountains in the background are. Another word for that would be collateral damage. Okay, but again, as we're looking at that, we also realize that it not only causes other side effects, but it begins to chip at the mountain of this person's health. It's the other systems in the body, and we have about 12 or 13 of those systems, are also negatively affected when you use medications. What most people do not realize is that while they're taking this drug or whatever it is, they have to be aware of what that drug can do to their normal body, their normal body systems. And therefore, they should be educated so as to know how to protect and even build strength in these other cells so that they are not affected the way this one is being affected. Make sense?
Yes, that makes great sense.
Thank you. Well, the other approach would be day in, day out, and this is really your responsibility, and that's the mountain to your left, is to know the things that make for health, know the things that make for strength, and continually, day in, day out, supply your body, your mind and your spirit with those things that help to make you strong. And as you do that, you enjoy life more. But in many cases, it also helps to, if there is an underlying disease or symptom going on, a strong body has a way of taking care of the other problems. And even if you're on drugs, I tell you, having your body being given the right nutrients will help the drugs to work even better. And as I say this, I think about my mentor, my close friend, Dr. Rayburn Goen. And many of you know who that is. He's about 94 now. And 7-8 years ago, he stumbled across this nutrition, the power of nutrition. And what he was told, I mean, he had about 21 problems wrong with him. I mean, he had a very high cholesterol, close to about 400. He had cancer in one part of his body. I mean, had all kinds of things wrong with him. All kinds of things. Anyway, what he did, he had been on like 8 or 9 medications. Well, when he realized this, he began to apply it for himself. He began to use the products, and use good nutrition. And what happened, and again, this is not a magic bullet thing, he found a way to use about 4 or 5 different products, and that helped to strengthen his body, strengthen his cells, so that in turn, his body would now be able to take care of those symptoms and of those diseases. And here's what happened. In about 4 months, and this is according to his own testimony, in about 4 months, 20 of those 21 things no longer bothered him. Mm-hmm. Now, if this had been someone on the streets and just said that, I would have said, well, you're trying to sell something. They probably paid you to do this. But if you know Dr. Goen, that is not possible, because he's very, very, very well off. He built one of the largest medical practices, private medical practices in the whole state. So he is very, very comfortable, and his kids also are very, very successful. So that is the truth, and that is what we're trying to get at here, folks. What we're trying to aim at is to help to build your cells, build your mind on a day-to-day basis, so that you don't have to fall prey to unnecessary ill health. This is one of my favorite quotes, because if we can focus, if we can remove ignorance, then hopefully people will be able to deal with complacency. And the reason why people are lazy and not doing what they need to do is because they really do not know what to do. And hopefully we'll be able to play our part in alleviating that problem. Okay. the issue with health, as always, is to focus not just on one aspect, but on several aspects. And, of course, we have this PNI slide that shows how your mind affects your brain, which affects your endocrine system. The endocrine system plays a huge part, by the way, folks, when it comes to the cardiovascular system. And we're going to get to that in not too long from now. The immune system, of course, plays a huge part. Question is, why study the cardiovascular system? Now, that's another duh question because it's right up there. Heart disease, cardiovascular disease is right up there, number one, as the cause of death. Cancer is number two, and it seems like they're doing this two-step. They keep dancing back and forth, but heart disease is right up there. Now, almost everybody you know probably has who is not on good nutritional supplementation is probably hypertensive, and that's probably the number one symptom of heart disease. Of course, cancer, strokes, lower respiratory problems, accidents, diabetes. Heart disease is the most important one, and this is not just an issue that we're concerned about for adults, but it's now affecting kids more and more and more. We're finding out that as doctors, pathologists go to the morgue and they dissect kids who died at 10 years, 8 years, they are finding accumulation of plaque in their arteries and their veins. Not a good thing, not a good way to start off life. And so it becomes of first importance for us to understand the basic principles where the cardiovascular system is concerned. And here's just a description of the cardiovascular system. The body system is, this system consists of heart, blood vessels, and blood. This system transports nutrients, waste products, gases, and hormones throughout the body and plays, mistake there, and plays an important role in immune responses and regulation of body temperature. Okay, that makes sense. There are four components usually of the cardiovascular system. Before I go on, we just want to take care of this topic and then move on. The lymphatic system is kind of like a supplementary system. It just takes excess fluid, excess fat, excess waste products that did not go into the veins after use, and it returns that to the heart. The lymphatic system plays a key part in some diseases, but it's also very, very important for us to understand how to keep the lymphatic system going, because if the lymphatic system is deficient or lacking, you could end up with accumulation of fluids in your extremities, in your feet especially, and it could also lead to the accumulation of toxins, because whenever fluid stays stagnant for too long, toxicity occurs, and that could be a problem. But we're not talking about the lymphatic system, we're talking about the cardiovascular system. Here's just a murky view of it. I think we'll try another one. Oops, what happened? Seeing the wrong screen here. Excuse me. Wow.
Sure.
Hang on, let me get this right first. Okay. Okay. There. What on earth happened? Sorry about that, folks. Can you see are you still seeing my screen?
It's starting to open up PowerPoint. Yeah, now there's PowerPoint, but it's not in slideshow view.
Okay. All right. Are you seeing it now?
Not quite yet.
Okay. I'll just wait for it. It's up right now.
I'll let you know as soon as it's in slideshow view for us.
Okay.
There we go. The joys of technology.
Yeah. Okay. Functions of the cardiovascular system. Okay. You can see that, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just going to breeze on to the next one because we have a lot to cover today. The notes, the handouts will be available afterwards. I wanted to mention here that the immune system, and I speak a lot about the immune system because that is probably your number one protection against disease, germs, and viruses. And about 15% of your immune system is in the blood, the circulatory system. And imagine that 70% is in the digestive system. We were not even taught this in medical school.
Mm.
All right, here's a nice view. Let's hope we can make sense of this. This is the circulatory system, okay? That's why it has blood in it. So that's summarizing what the slide you just saw 2 slides prior to this. In the digestive tract, food goes in. The circulatory system has to be available to pick up the digested food and deliver it all the way to the cells of the body, whether they be muscle cells, brain cells, nerve cells, heart cells. The waste products have to be sent via the urinary system outside. This also is a very important system because the respiratory system, oxygen has to come in and it has to be exchanged over here. If there's a disease of the respiratory system, that will impair the ability of the blood to take in oxygen. Now, let me just give you just let you know how serious that is. If your brain cells, and of course your brain is the most important organ, if your brain cells are lacking in oxygen for more than 4 minutes, in some cases 7 minutes, for more than 4 minutes, let's leave it as 4 minutes, there will be irreversible damage to the brain. Now, in some cases, the body has been able to restore and regain function where that damage has happened. But in majority of cases, that damage is irreversible. And so it just shows that the cardiovascular system is really what helps to deliver the nutrients to the cells. If the cardiovascular system shuts down, if the heart shuts down, bye-bye, baby. You're going to ship your saddle home. That's just, that person's goose is cooked. So the cardiovascular system consists, of course, of, like we said, the heart, the blood vessels. Let's talk about the heart first, and then we'll go on to the next one. The human heart is the center, is right there in the center of the chest. Dr. Steve Summy did an excellent job on describing the various functions of the heart. Now, most of us know it primarily as a biophysical pump that it just pumps blood to the rest of the body. But it is also an endocrine gland, an electromagnetic transmitter. I never knew that before myself. And, of course, it has about 40,000 nerve cells. So it is very, very important for transmission of impulses and transmission of information as well as being a pump. So if anything goes wrong, these 4 problems, these 4 factors or 4 functions could be affected. All right. Let's talk about circulation. And again, you have the whole system of arteries and veins that go through the body. We just want to make sure we have an overall view of how the system works. Now, before I go on, I just want to mention quickly that the heart beats about between 50 and 90 beats a minute, and at rest. Now, if you're someone like Lance Armstrong, it beats about 32 per minute. I don't know how that's possible, but some people are like that. Okay, the key factors in the cardiovascular system, the most important factors, I'll chalk it down to about 3, but the 2 up there are the most important ones. The circulatory, the cellular or tissue perfusion simply means the amount of blood that actually gets to the cells of the body. Remember, we mentioned about the brain, if it lacks blood, if it lacks oxygen for 4 minutes, it's going to die. Other parts of the body, too, cannot last for too long without having blood supply, because blood supply brings with it the hormones, the oxygen, the nutrition, and all that. So this is key. I mean, this is really, in most disease conditions, if not all, in most disease conditions, part of the problem, or that caused the problem, part of what caused the problem was that there was a diminished blood flow to those regions or to that system that is diseased. And so it is critical, absolutely critical, that blood flow is maintained to those parts. And again, with age, we understand that after the age of 40, the overall tissue or cellular perfusion diminishes by about 5% every 10 years. So you have to be cognizant of that, because when you think about that, you're going to realize that, well, if you do other things, that jeopardize tissue perfusion, like you smoke, you drink, it's going to further make things worse. And, of course, stress plays a huge part. And we're going to talk about more emotional problems that can actually reduce tissue perfusion. But that is number one thing. That is absolutely number one thing. Number 2 thing, of course, is blood pressure. It's one thing to have blood getting to where it needs to get to. It's another thing entirely if the pressure is either too low or too high. As a matter of fact, they're quite connected. And of course, the third, endothelial integrity, simply means the lining of the blood vessels. Our blood vessels have to be, the linings have to be smooth and without rough edges. Any rough edges could cause the aggregation of platelets. And platelets are another part of like red blood cells and white blood cells. But platelets are important in the clotting system, the clotting cascade. If platelets are impeded in their flow through the lumen of the blood vessel, if they get caught anywhere in a crack, in a crevice, what happens is that they trigger off a whole process that brings in more platelets and brings in more cells and eventually causes damage, further damage, and eventually could block the blood vessel. So we don't want that because that would reduce tissue perfusion and would affect the blood pressure. All right, let's go on to the next slide. Let's talk a little bit about cellular perfusion. I got this slide up to show that different parts of the brain, different parts of the body, different organs, different systems have different levels of perfusion or different amount of blood flow. Now, if you notice right up here, when you're at rest, the total blood flow is a little less than 6,000 mils a minute. That's 6 liters per minute. But during exercise, it could go way up to about 17,500. That's several-fold. That's like a threefold increase, isn't it? Yeah. Almost, yeah, threefold increase, and that's because the heart can actually be stimulated to beat a lot more. But let's look at some of these real quick. If you notice here that the brain's blood flow is maintained at the same level, and that's because you just cannot jeopardize. The brain cells are so fragile that they have to have a constant flow, blood flow. You don't want to mess with the whole system up there in the brain. So therefore, the blood flow is maintained. However, the rate at which the cells take up oxygen, take up glucose, could be accelerated during exercise or during stress or when you're reading hard. I mean, like for instance, like me now, when I was preparing for this class, oh my goodness, I was hungry all the time because I was just using so much effort just to understand what I was reading in the first place and think about how to put it in a picture and draw it and make it understandable to the layperson. So that process takes a lot of energy. Blood flow pretty much remains the same, but energy is taken up more, especially when you're exerting using your brain. Of course, the heart, because it has to pump 3 times as much, you can see that it takes in a lot more, has taken a lot more blood through the coronary vessels and just goes further down. What I couldn't understand was that with the abdomen, I didn't understand why it had to be multiplied so many times. That's like I don't know, quite a lot. I need to read that some more, but I think that has to do with when you're exercising, you need a lot more energy, so maybe the blood vessels have to go to the intestines and take up more food and more particles to be digested by the muscles and the other parts of the body that are involved. Of course, skeletal muscle increases and all that. Okay. Any questions, Sherry?
Well, why does the distribution of blood go down in the kidneys?
Because, well, when it comes to exercise, you are trying to conserve. You're trying to minimize unnecessary places. You want to shunt the blood, shunt nutrients, shunt oxygen to the parts of the body that need them the most. The kidneys don't really need them. The kidneys are just there to remove excess waste and excess water. Mm-hmm. So they don't really need blood flow that much, but the muscles do, and of course the heart muscle does too.
Yes, this is great. This is fascinating.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Okay. Here's a slide messed up. This is hot, folks. I don't even know why I had to write hot in it. I mean, the picture speaks for itself. But I made a mistake. I should put a T there. I forgot to put a T there. And the whole idea I'm trying to portray here is that blood flow. The heart has to pump blood to the body cells. When there's ample blood flow for that organ or for that tissue, the cell is happy. It gives all the nutrients that it needs. And I had this picture up here to show that if there isn't ample blood flow, and here's the problem. Different parts of the body are not as well perfused as the others are. Now, let me give you this quick example. The face is extremely well perfused. You can see, and these are muscles actually, but this correlates. I mean, the muscles, the red parts, are also correlate with the amount of blood flow. So you have more blood flow around these areas, or blood perfusion around these areas, because they are red, and they basically, you can just, it usually is a good correlation. Let me just put it that way. The face heals. If you have a cut on the face, it heals a lot faster than, let's say, on the foot, on the back of the heel, for instance. The same thing with if you think about the back. Now, 20 million plus people a year in the United States are suffering from chronic back pain. And where does back pain, what's the commonest site for back pain?
The lower back, right where there's not much circulation.
Exactly. Lower back, right there. There isn't much circulation. So it doesn't really heal as well. Of course, part of it is that the lower back carries a lot more load. It carries most of the load of the weight of the body. But if it had more perfusion, it would probably heal better, and you wouldn't have all those problems. Now, who am I to challenge the way we were built and made? But that's what I noticed about this. So the key, again, is perfusion. Cells have to have adequate perfusion in order to be healthy. And what happens if you don't? If for any reason, either this blood vessel is cut, it's occluded, maybe like I mentioned, platelets. If there are too many platelets and they block the place, or if there's a thrombus, or even if there's a cancer cell, whatever it is, especially when it comes to the smaller blood vessels like the capillaries in the fingers, in the toes. As I'm saying this, I'm thinking about sickle cell disease. Black African Americans suffer a lot more. They have that disease, sickle cell disease. White people don't have that. White people have cystic fibrosis, so it's one or the other, both genetic conditions. In sickle cell disease, the problem with sickle cell disease is that the red blood cells are no longer as elastic and as smooth as they should be, and so they get easily hardened, and they get easily damaged, and they easily could, especially when it comes to small capillaries, they could block the blood vessels. And when that happens, it could result in a couple of things. It could result in death. It could result in the release of chemicals which cause severe pain. And I saw these sickle cell kids. Oh my goodness! I mean, your heart just goes out to them. I know a kid who was like 25 years old. He was the height of a 6-year-old because he had so many what they call sickle cell crises, that his bones had broken down, his muscles had decayed, and he was just, your heart just went out to him, like I said. But all that is because of disruption in blood flow. This also applies in, hang on, let me just go back to that real quick. This also applies in, well, when it comes to cardiovascular disease, for instance, with stroke. When it comes to stroke, it's because the brain cell somehow has been cut off from its lifeblood, its blood supply. The blood, either the vessel got occluded, or like I said, it exploded. And when it comes to high blood pressure, the blood vessels are just exploded, and so the blood did not get to the brain cell, and that causes death. Anyway, there are some things we can talk about this. I got this from Dr. Harry's slides. One of the advantages to putting up shows like this is that you get to use everybody else's information. It makes you look smart. People think you're smart. All right. Huh?
That you are.
Oh, well, thanks a lot. Thanks. Here you have, I don't know what you want, Sherry, but you're not getting it. Anyway, here you have the carotid arteries. The carotid arteries actually supply the brain. They're the most important vessels that actually supply the brain. And you can see the plaque building up there. And so, and we're going to explain a little bit more about what causes plaque. Inflammation plays a part. Yes, cholesterol plays a part, but it is not as obvious as the establishment wants us to believe. And here's what happens when you have atherosclerosis. That's when cholesterol, plaque, white blood cells, dead tissue begin to build up in what should be a normal arterial lumen, a normal space. Okay. Are we okay?
Yes, I have a question. Is it more likely that you would have that narrowing in those places in your body where there's not as much flow, or is there not really a connection there?
That's a good question. Is it more likely? It could be. What we know is that there is a generalized, when you have inflammation and when there's plaque buildup, it's usually all over the body. It's usually in all the blood vessels. Now, if you have a wide lumen, then there might be buildup there, but because you have such a wide lumen or bore, the blood still flows through, but it shows up more if the lumen is narrow, like you mentioned. So it's more likely that you're going to see the effects when the lumen is narrow. Make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And again, here's some more pictures. Here's part of what causes the disease. If there's a cut, now this is, again, you're looking at the cross-section of a blood vessel, okay? So this is the outer shell, the outer covering, and this is the inner lining. So in here would be the red blood cells. If there's a cut here, damage from anything, I mean, we constantly experience damage in our blood vessels, but because we're healthy, hopefully, the body is able to heal it and detect it in time and plug up the hole. In some cases, if there's a problem with inflammation in the body, and again, we're going to get to that, it causes the buildup of blood clots. But let me move on to the next one. I show this picture here because this is probably the key thing when it comes to stroke. It's a cessation in some part of the brain due to a couple of things that could, like we mentioned. In Alzheimer's disease, let's say, for instance, with the brain, what they're finding out is that the blood flow to certain parts of the brain is diminished, and also the other thing they're finding out is that there's a lot more free radical damage in people who eventually develop Alzheimer's disease. They don't have enough protection with antioxidants. So there's this big thing about using antioxidants to help protect your brain. Some hormonal supplements, and there's a lot of controversy where hormonal supplements are concerned, and that's why I always recommend that we start first of all with the building blocks for those hormones rather than the hormones themselves, because your body knows what to do with it. If you just come from outside and just introduce a fully formed hormone, it doesn't matter. Yeah, it's natural is a lot better than synthetic, obviously, but you're still introducing a fully formed hormone. It can knock your body systems out of balance, and therefore it's really important to give the body what it needs. So the body, because the body has its own intelligence, it will be able to take care of the problem, to be able to use the building blocks in a way that does not upset the balance. Okay, the key thing, and I got this from my slide on the human brain. Some of you might have listened to my class our class on the human brain. But the two main things with the brain, again, are the perfusion, blood flow, and, of course, the connection between the nerves. The nerves have to connect and communicate with each other in order to function. Well, of course, without blood flow, you're not really going to say much about communication either. So it's very, very important to ensure that there is adequate blood flow to the brain as well as to other tissues too. Okay, another thing we kind of noticed, as I was talking about this, and this is an interesting factor, what they're finding out, folks, with cancer is that even cancer cells, because they're cells, albeit unnatural, terrible, nasty cells, but cancer cells also need a blood supply. And here's what they found out, and this is coming from a doctor who was initially a surgeon, and he started noticing this, and he began to develop a drug that would stop it. What they began to realize was that the cancer cells themselves actually secrete substances which draw blood, which cause the formation of new blood vessels that will feed the cancer cells, and these cancer cells actually secrete these chemicals in a much more effective way than normal cells do, and so they kind of draw blood supply to themselves. So one of the things that they started looking at was creating drugs that would disrupt the cancer cell's ability to form blood supplies and to form its blood supplies. Anyway, this just underscores the importance for survival of any cell in the body, the importance of cellular perfusion. All right, we talked about the heart. We talked about generalized perfusion. Let's talk about the arteries themselves, and we're going to move on to the veins next. Here's a cross-section again of a typical artery. Now, the arteries are different from the veins in that they have a much thicker muscular inner layer, or middle layer. This is actually the middle layer. The inner layer is this called the endothelium. That's what gets damaged, and that's what needs to be healed. These, of course, are the blood vessels. The problem in hypertension, in some cases, it's actually due to buildup of plaque. In some cases, it's actually due to a thickening of this muscle. And what happens if this lumen becomes narrow? It's kind of like when you think about a hose. When you're squirting, you open the tap, the faucet, and you're spraying the hose. You're spraying the garden. If you narrow the outflow by putting your thumb over it, well, the pressure comes out a lot more, right?
Right.
If you take your thumb off, of course, everybody has sprinklers here, so we probably wouldn't relate to that, but
we do know what hoses are.
Okay, good. Okay. So what happens in hypertension many times is that this wall becomes a lot thicker, therefore narrowing the lumen of this blood vessel, and therefore the pressure increases. And a lot of factors that attribute to that. Hormones, like we mentioned, play a part, but also certain chemicals, certain other factors. Well, okay, we'll get to that, like I said. Let's talk about the veins real quick. The veins do not have muscles like the arteries do, and so they have to rely on contraction, movement of the muscles around the veins to push the blood. These arrows actually should be pointing upwards, but they're pointing downwards. So just assume that's kind of like down on your head or something, and then you'll be able to understand what I'm talking about. But when the vein is the blood moves better through the veins when the muscles are contracting. That's why it is so important for people to exercise, because as you exercise, blood moves better. The same thing with the lymphatic tissue. Blood circulation is improved when you're using your legs, using your limbs. When you're sedentary or when you're stationary, that isn't too good because it predisposes to a risk of stasis of the blood staying still and you not being able to function and could predispose to disease. Here's another picture showing both the arteries, which are in red. Veins are usually in green because of oxygen. It's really oxygen that makes, did I say green? I meant blue, excuse me. It's oxygen that makes the arteries bright red, and the lack of oxygen that gives them a bluish tinge. Okay, let's talk about blood pressure. Again, back to that same picture. Blood pressure is controlled by a number of centers. Of course, the most important centers are, of course, in the brain. Two parts, the medulla and the hypothalamus. And these two represent the two main ways information is transmitted around the body. The medulla, which is really that's the lowest part of the brain. It's at the part where your skull meets your neck. It's hidden right there. I actually had a friend who had neurosurgery. She's a doctor too, for a growth in her medulla. That is scary because the medulla is what controls blood pressure, it controls heart rate, it controls respiration, it controls all those subconscious involuntary things that you're doing. So if the medulla is damaged, there isn't much to say. She was really fortunate, and they were able to remove the tumor completely. And gosh, I mean, when I first heard it, I was scared. But she's okay. She's recovering. I wish I could get her on nutrients too, because that would definitely help her recovery. But anyway, the medulla receives a lot of information, primarily from nervous tissue, from the nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system. The hypothalamus that we talk about a lot actually receives most of its information from the hormones. in the body. And these hormones there are about 200 different hormones in the body, and they're constantly sending information to the brain, letting it know what is going on. Now, in this particular case, we're talking about blood pressure, how blood pressure is controlled. So there are centers in the brain. There also is a center, or there are receptors in the carotid artery. That's what supplies the main artery that supplies the brain. It senses the amount of blood pressure that's going, and the pressure at which the blood is flowing. It sends signals to the brain too. Same thing at the aortic arch. Same thing in the kidneys. But the kidneys also regulate how much fluid there is in the body. So if there's too much fluid, for instance, that could predispose to high blood pressure. So the kidneys increase their excretion of water into the bladder and out the body to reduce the amount of blood pressure. If there is not enough fluid, if the blood pressure is not high enough or normal, and on average 140 over 90 is the higher limit of normal. Anything above that is what is counted as borderline hypertension and going on to hypertension. So if the kidney sense that the blood pressure is low, what does it do? It conserves water and does not excrete it like it should. So this whole system is a very finely tuned system that is controlled, as always, by the brain. So again, the key is information transfer. The key is always communication. We've said this over and over again in our classes. We can't overstate the importance. Okay, and I just show this picture here. This is again from our class on the human brain, but to show that the two main ways by which information is transferred are through the nervous tissue, and these are both nerves, nerve endings, and through hormones actually latching onto cells via receptors. Now, whether it's the nervous tissue or whether it's the cells via receptors, all these cells, to receive information, have to have receptors. And what are receptors made up of? Remember?
I don't remember.
Okay. Receptors are all made up of the sugars called glyconutrients, about 8 of them, only 8 different kinds of sugars that make up receptors. And these stalks there actually stand for the proteins or the fat. So they could call this whole thing a glycoprotein or a glyco sugar, a glycolipid. These act as receptors. It's kind of like your sense organs in the body. The sense organs have to be able to receive information and transmit it to the brain, both sense organs within the body and sense organs without the body. They have to transmit that information to the brain. If your brain receives no information, your brain is comatose and on its way to being dead. For the brain to function, it has to receive information. In the same way, for cells to function properly, they have to receive information on a continuous, ongoing basis. All right, let's talk about heart disease. Here's an interesting fact. More than 50% of people who suffer heart attacks don't even have the usual risk factors.
Mm.
Now, isn't that amazing? This is actually a study done by one of the prestigious universities. And think about it. When we think about, if he had a heart attack, we think, well, he must have had very high cholesterol. He must have been a smoker. He must have been severely overweight, and he must have been a really type A personality, screaming and shouting at everybody. Well, that is not a usual risk factor, or is it? Anyway, emotional problems are a problem. But think about that. Now, here's what they are finding out more and more and more. The 2 top risk factors for heart attacks are, believe it or not, job dissatisfaction and a low self-happiness rating. Basically, wow. Isn't that amazing? Basically, this second one there really speaks about your social relationships, how much love you enjoy, and how much social contact are you alone. They found out that single people have, divorced people. I know both single people and divorced people have a much higher rate of heart disease, strokes, and hypertension than people who are married. That is another fact. So job dissatisfaction. Have you ever wondered why the commonest time for a heart attack is at 9 a.m. on a Monday morning?
Yeah, that's interesting.
It is, isn't it? That is really the commonest time for a heart attack. So, and obviously, when you think about it, you realize that most people aren't really happy with their jobs. So that plays a key role.
And goes along with the stress things we learned last week.
Goes on along with the stress things that we learned last week. And one of my passions in life is really to help people understand, find out what they want to do with their lives. Because the sooner you find out for sure what you want to do, the better it would be for you in every regard, whether it's with your enjoyment of life, whether it's your financial health, or whether it's even your mental and physical health. It's going to affect everything else because you spend the most of your life doing things, working anyway, so might as well spend it doing something you love. All right. What are the diseases that increase? That I just mentioned those two, but that is not to say that these other factors are negligible. Of course, they're very, very important too. High blood pressure could predispose to heart disease, and the reason for this is this: your blood vessels, your arteries and veins, can only withstand so much pressure. If there's a crack, if there's a slit somewhere, it can only withstand so much pressure. And if a crack could easily deteriorate into a huge gap and eventually could rupture. And so blood pressure has to be controlled at all costs, really. Diabetes also plays a huge role because of the excess sugar in the blood and also the excess insulin in the blood. Both play a huge role in damaging tissues and damaging blood vessels and could also result in heart disease. Cholesterol and or triglycerides. Cholesterol does play a part, but it is not the way it's exaggerated by the establishment. Obesity, of course, plays a part, and the reason for obesity playing a part is because we are now finding out that excess fat in the body actually results in the secretion of hormones which actually increase inflammation, and not just inflammation, but actually cause there to be an increased blood pressure and eventually heart disease.
David, what was that other thing on there? Dyslipidemia? What is that?
Dyslipidemia simply means lipids, of course, refer to fat. This means that they're out of control, out of whack. For instance, we know about HDL, which is the high-density lipoproteins, which is a good cholesterol, and then we have the LDL, which is the quote-unquote bad cholesterol. If they're out of whack, if they're out of balance, then that's what is called dyslipidemia. Okay,
great. Thanks.
It is an abnormal metabolism of lipids. Okay. Lifestyles are predisposed to, what does this mean again? This is heart disease, okay? Can't imagine me forgetting this. It's going to come from cardiovascular, arterial disease. Okay, excessive alcohol intake, lack of exercise, smoking, stress. One of the most important, though, is depression. Now, folks, research is coming out more and more and more. And this is, I was astounded when I first began to study this. Here's a quote. Depression, first of all, maims the mind, then it kills the body.
Wow.
Research is coming out more and more and more. As a matter of fact, let me tell you this one. It's going to be in the notes too, but they're finding out that if you have had one bout of chronic depression, even if you're free of it, if you have had a bout of chronic depression, it predisposes you to almost a threefold greater chance you're going to have a heart disease. But also, they are also finding out that it actually damages the bones. actually causes osteoporosis.
Wow.
Now, you would never think that depression, something like depression, would affect your bones. I mean, what's the connection, for Pete's sake? But they're finding it out. They're finding it out more and more and more. And I'll probably mention a little bit about that before this is over. Smoking and heart disease. Cigarette smoking is the leading preventable cause of death among both women and men in the United States. Smoking more than doubles CAD incidence and increases CAD mortality by approximately, I don't know why I'm drawing a blank here, 70%. Okay, we'll go to the next one. All right, let's talk about the cholesterol issue. In the past few years, close to a decade now, there's been this explosion of information about cholesterol being the culprit. If you want to save yourself from heart disease, if you want to save yourself from hypertension, you want to reduce your cholesterol at all costs. Now, one of the problems is that they've been reducing this cholesterol. I mean, at one time it was like, if you have anything above 250, you're at risk. And then they brought it down to 200. Now I had in my class, I teach a class at the college. In my class, this lady says she walked into a doctor's office and she had a cholesterol level of 121. And the doctor says she's at risk, that she's borderline and she might need to start anti-cholesterol medications.
Wow.
Now, here's the problem. The problem is that, and we showed that picture earlier on. I don't know if it's still there. Yeah, okay, it's right here. If you just focus on the symptom or the problem, which is high cholesterol, and now, folks, there's been a lot of research out there that actually show that cholesterol may not really be the main culprit. We're going to tell you what that main culprit is in a little while. But speaking about cholesterol-lowering drugs, they found out that most cholesterol-lowering drugs, especially the statins, actually not only do they affect the cholesterol, but they deprive the cells of the body of a very key nutrient, a key chemical, I think it's a protein called CoQ10, which is coenzyme 10. And that CoQ10 is essential for the strength of the heart muscle, and not just the heart muscle, but skeletal muscles all over the body. What they're finding out, a common side effect of these statins is that people get weak. Well, of course they get weak because it's depriving the bodies of CoQ10. Now, if it weakens your physical body, your limbs, that's not too bad. But when it begins to weaken your heart, which is the life pump of your body, then you have a problem. Because remember, for cells to be healthy in the body, they have to have adequate perfusion. And perfusion starts with blood being pumped out of the heart into the blood vessels. So these drugs may be causing a major problem, and which is already beginning to show up now. So, and it's unfortunate that there's this huge drive to really sell anti-cholesterol drugs. And again, this might be helping people, but at the same time, people need to be educated to know what to do to further protect themselves so they don't have problems in the future. Now, this whole thing about cholesterol, this whole thing about fat, so the other dietary thing they're saying is, well, reduce your fat intake, and that's good, especially animal fat. But if you focused only on that, you might still miss the boat. As a matter of fact, many are missing the boat because the Eskimos in Greenland, a study was done a few years ago, and the Japanese. Now, let's start with the Eskimos. The Eskimos eat a diet very high in fat, very, very high. But they also have a lot of fish. They have a lot of fish, which they take. The Japanese have a low-fat diet, but they still take a lot of fish, and they'll have other things in their diet that actually have these fatty acids called omega-3s. Now, the omega-3s, which is in fish and in other foods, the Eskimos take a lot of the fish too. The omega-3s are actually known for their anti-inflammatory effect. Now, I was going to say this, that both groups of people have a very, very low incidence of heart disease. Very, very low incidence. And again, the answer was in was regards to what they were taking in addition to whatever else they were doing. So, and the key was inflammation. The key was their protection from inflammation. We in the Western world are not protected that much from inflammation because a lot of our diets contain toxins, preservatives, vegetable oils. A lot of the oils that we have actually have omega-6s. Omega-6s actually are pro-inflammatory agents. Now, in other words, they cause inflammation. Omega-3s do not cause inflammation. And why am I talking about inflammation? Well, they're finding out that inflammation, and we have a class of inflammation too, so if you want to study that some more, we have some great quotes. And do we have an MP3 on it?
I think so.
Okay. Inflammation is what really is responsible for a lot of the problems of disease, whether in terms of cancer or whether in terms of autoimmune conditions or even heart disease. As a matter of fact, one study showed that over 98% of all heart disease starts with inflammation. And there's a lot of research that's gone on there. So the answer is not as much cholesterol. Now, that doesn't mean you should go around with a very high cholesterol. It's very important that you reduce your cholesterol. But how about this? How about giving your body, feeding your body, giving your body the vital nutrients that it needs to regulate its cholesterol levels, to regulate its inflammation levels. You see, the idea is this. Your body wants to be well. Your body wants to be healed. And it's going to continually do everything it can to, with the limited resources that you give it, to attain that level. The level of health you are enjoying now is the level of health you've permitted your body to enjoy. Whether through your own knowledge or through your own ignorance, that is really what has happened. All we're saying now is that your body can reduce your cholesterol levels if you give it the right nutrients. And of course, again, the difference is this. We're not saying stop your medications altogether. Of course not. I would be the last person to say that. But it's important for you to not rely entirely on medications because you are not. Your body does not need the medications to live. It needs nutrients to live. So use the nutrients as well as the medications. And then you can taper that off as you go along. Inflammation is the culprit. Emotional issues, depression, epidemic of anger, and hostility all raise C-reactive protein levels. What is C-reactive protein? This is one of the key markers of inflammation. In fact, if there's an inflammatory process going on in the body, you're going to find a lot of they call it CRP, C-reactive protein levels. And, of course, that means there's a lot of inflammation. So depression, these emotional things, folks, you just can't mess with them. You cannot mess with these emotional problems, issues. You've got to find a way to live a life of peace and happiness. What can you do? Well, we've alluded to things along the way. And it's all captured in our philosophy, which means start now, build strength, start getting information, start finding out what you need to do to strengthen what remains. You will always have cells in your body that know what to do. It doesn't matter how far you've gone. Your body has so much recuperative ability that it will recover. And you usually try and summarize the whole philosophy into four main things. A focused, happy, and productive mind. And of course, you can't do that if you're not doing something, if you're not involved in a career or vocation or something that is of benefit to others. I mean, you just can't. So the key number one thing is to find that sense, that purpose for your life, and that purpose for which you were born. Of course, regular diets, nutritional supplementation is important, but don't think you can get away with eating all kinds of terrible foods and not take some responsibility for that. You need to have both. Healthy living, of course, includes exercise. Very, very important. Remember, your veins, the blood in your veins, and the fluids in your lymph move better when you exercise, amongst many other things. Exercise, another thing they found out is that exercise causes over 140 different genes to be turned on in a beneficial way.
Wow, so it's more than just burning some extra calories.
Oh, yeah, a lot more than that. A lot more than that. It just improves your well-being in a very full way, a wholesome way. Of course, you need to understand, as you grow older, you're going to need the medical system for sure. But you need to understand what questions to ask. Studies show that patients who go into the doctor's room, they're so intimidated by the white coat or whatever it is, that they go in and they had questions. They had about 4 questions they wanted to ask. They get into the office. Can't remember one. Can't remember a single question. They leave dejected and unhappy. So being empowered starts with having information. Okay? All right, and again, we have this picture here to show this is where we need to focus on. We have about 12, you count the blood, 13 systems in the human body. 13 systems in the human body. These 3 systems, the nervous system, the endocrine system, and the immune system, if you can focus on these, especially where your cardiovascular system is involved, you're in good shape. Okay. Next slide. Move it. Come on, folks. All right, next slide. The wonders of technology, like you say. Okay. All right. Let's go on to nutrition, okay? I got this from Dr. Reg McDaniel. This is probably one of the best quotes I have ever seen, I have to tell you. This Roger Williams, he discovered a pantothenic acid or vitamin B5, and he named folic acid. What did they give to every pregnant woman? Every pregnant woman, they give her folic acid, which if pregnant babies are actually born with birth defects, in some cases with people or pregnant women who lack folic acid. So this man knows what he's talking about. And folks, apologize, and we're kind of like going over the hour now. We're going to record this, so it'll be available for you later on. The human body heals itself, and proper nutrition provides the resources needed to accomplish that task. The key is proper nutrition. So we must, if our body is suffering, it means that the body is not healing itself. If it's not healing itself, it must mean that it is not receiving the proper nutrition. It doesn't matter what you're eating or how balanced your diet, how balanced you think your diet is. If your body is still suffering, then it means that somewhere along the way you are missing or lacking a specific nutrition. And the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition also says that. It says 99% of us are not even getting the daily nutrition they need from food. So you might be one of the privileged few. I doubt it. The focus is with the endocrine system, and it's all about balance. And you see this guy doing a tightrope thing on a bicycle. Crazy. Another guy here on a bicycle. Balance is the key. Excuse me. Balance is the key. If we can get things in the right balance, whether it's with the hormones. I know that there's a big thing about the estrogen, progesterone balance. They found out in many cases, if it's out of whack, it can result in heart disease, osteoporosis, especially in the women, and hypertension. That's the main nutrients needed for optimal health. Real quick, essential vitamins and minerals. Vitamin E is especially important for the heart. Especially important for the heart. It's an antioxidant, but does something else for the heart. The mineral that is especially important for the heart and also works in conjunction with vitamin E is actually a mineral called selenium. Selenium. If all you give is vitamin E to a patient and you do not add a good bioavailable supplement of selenium, that vitamin E will not work. And in some cases, it has given vitamin E a bad rap. Some studies actually claim, although I doubt the validity of those studies, claim that vitamin E can be harmful. Like I said, I doubt it. essential amino acids, which serve as the building blocks for all proteins. What is that essential amino acids? That well, actually, it's not just essential amino acids. There are some non-essential amino acids that are very, very important specifically for the cardiovascular system. And that, what comes to mind now is arginine. Let's look at that real quick. Arginine, like Dr. Harry, again, there's an MP3 available for that. And he gave, it's amazing the research that is out there on this singular molecule and the amount of things that it does. I was really blown away by what it can do when it is converted to the substance called nitric oxide. We found out that it actually helps to unclog blood vessels. It actually helps to clean up plaque. And I'm not sure I should say this, but I had a personal experience with this. Sherry, remember you sent me some of this, some of the arginine. Well, I know I told you about this a while before, but I mean, ever since I've been young, I've had this once in a while, and I mean, never really bothered me, but I would have this once in a while, have this tightness in my chest, usually in the left side, and obviously that's where the heart is. And I used to be bothered about it for a while. It would come and go, and sometimes when I felt stressed, it would be there. Another thing I noticed a few months ago was that when I woke up in the morning, I would have pain at the soles of my feet. Whenever I was so tender when I walked around. When I started using this, I mean, folks, don't forget, I use all kinds of supplements. I know to use supplements, even with those I wasn't getting the answers, where this was concerned. And I have to tell you now that the past 1 month or so, that tightness or that ache I felt, like I said, I don't think it's anything serious, but I just didn't feel that thing again. So, yeah. There may be some truth to this thing. I mean, it tastes really yucky. I guess that's what sent it to me in the first place. But yes, it does play a role in helping. Again, the word is perfusion, cellular perfusion. If you can get enough blood flowing to the parts of your body, that will help, no matter what the condition is. The problem with diabetic foot, for instance, people with diabetes and they sometimes have amputated, is because the blood flow to their limbs, to their feet, to their toes was systematically cut off over a period of time until the cells distal to that occlusion or blockade. We're not getting the nutrients, we're not getting the oxygen, we're not getting the food that they needed, and so they died. And the key is occlusion or blockade, and so we have to find a way to. And so again, I'm putting a plug for this thing. I'm not even in the company, folks. So I am not in the company. So I'm not an associate, but it does help out. Fatty acids, we mentioned. Inflammation, omega-3s are especially important for fatty acid for inflammation. Inflammation, like we said, is one of the key things when it comes to heart disease and cardiovascular problems. Antioxidants, mentioned this in Alzheimer's disease and really everywhere in your body. They found out that over 70% of all diseases are actually start off with free radical damage, and we also have an MP3 class on that. And really, the connection between free radical damage and inflammation is that free radical damage is an injury that can result in inflammation, and so the cascade continues. So it's very, very important. Remember, even the cells in the arteries and veins, the cells that make up those arteries and veins, those muscles, those walls, the lining, everything is made up of cells. So if there is free radical damage to those cells in the arteries and veins, well, it's going to predispose you to damage and inflammation and plaque formation and white blood cell accumulation and platelet accumulation and cholesterol accumulation and, well, you know the rest.
All kinds of bad stuff.
All kinds of bad stuff, right. Fiber is very important for a number of reasons. It's very, very important because it keeps your digestive tract healthy. Glyconutrients, we cannot cannot and will not, cannot overemphasize the importance of these glyconutrients. Let me give you a quick example. If there's damage to the lining in your blood vessel, it is the immune system, specifically the macrophage in the immune system, that detects that problem. And what does the macrophage do? It detects the problem and it sends impulses to either the bone marrow or to a stem cell center. Yes, our body produces stem cells in the bone marrow and in other parts of the body. It sends that impulse and it says, send replacements to come and repair or take care of this injury in the lining of this blood vessel before something bad happens. And so it sends that impulse, and so the bone marrow jumpstarts, kicks up, and it begins to churn out stem cells, which eventually will come and replace that the crack or the damage or repair the damage. Mm-hmm. It has been found out that this process can be accelerated to up to about 8 times the normal process if there's damage. But again, it starts with the macrophage, and the way the macrophage sends that impulse to the bone marrow is through glyco, it's through sugars, it's through proteins. But remember, like we said, whatever information is being received through those sense organs of the cell called glycoproteins or glycolipids. It just makes sense that you have enough of those in the body. Again, we're not getting enough in our diet. Phytochemicals could include anti-inflammatories, could include antioxidants, and a host of other things that are very, very important, primarily for detoxification and to protect the body against damage. Phytosterols kind of form the building blocks that I spoke about. Phytosterols form the building blocks for things like for hormones like estrogen, progesterone, aldosterone, and other hormones, and which are extremely important for blood pressure regulation. Again, folks, the answer, what you can do, lies really on the left side. You leave the doctor to do what he does best when it comes to disease. You take care of your body, and that's why we have this quote up here. Let your doctor take care of your disease. You must take care of your health. Okay, I think that kind of wraps it up. Do you have any questions for this?
Yeah, yes, we do have a few questions. Somebody typed in, was wondering if when you feel lightheaded, is that a sign that blood is not reaching your brain properly?
That is a good sign, yes. That is a good sign. It could also mean that blood vessels in your brain, it may mean that blood is reaching your brain, but there might be certain parts of the brain that the blood vessels are constricted or blocked or whatever it is. I'm hoping that's not what the case is there with you, but that is definitely something you want to see a doctor about.
Right. Is the cancer cell activity that draws the formation of blood vessels to them or form new ones called angiogenesis?
What was the question?
Let me try reading it again. It says, is the cancer cell activity that draws the formation of blood vessels to them to form new ones called angiogenesis?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
But angiogenesis, in some cases, they actually use the word neogenesis, which means new vessel formation. But yes, angiogenesis. There's actually a drug that was made to deal with angiogenesis called endostatin. And the person who actually discovered this whole angiogenesis thing was a doctor by the name of Judah Folkman. And several years ago, when he first started talking about it, everybody laughed at him. They ridiculed him. The graduate students stayed away from his lab in the droves because they were like, this guy is cuckoo. Whoever thought about that? But like with every discovery, there's first of all ridicule. Now everybody thinks it's simple common sense.
Mm-hmm. Is less than 20% plaque buildup in the carotid artery average for a 57-year-old woman, or should this person try cleansing that plaque through dietary control?
My thinking is this, folks. If you have to ask about that, you need to go ahead and get it done. Plaque formation is of any amount is really not acceptable.
Right.
There are people who actually have absolutely clean, well, not absolutely, but relatively clean blood vessels and smooth arterial walls. So you want to aim for that.
Well, and it seems like you wouldn't want to wait until you had plaque to start doing dietary things.
Right, exactly. You don't want to wait until it's 50% for Pete's sake.
Right. Okay. Does chewing tobacco affect you the same way as smoking?
Not the same way. Well, because chewing tobacco, I mean, you're still taking in nicotine for one, and two, you're also taking in chemicals, which will which cause damage to your tongue, your throat, to your esophagus. You have a greater risk of having throat cancer if you chew tobacco than if you smoke. Smoking predisposes to lung cancer, but chewing tobacco, the chemicals is what we're talking about, cause damage and lead to cancer.
Right. Somebody also asked about omega-9s. I know we've talked about just doing a whole class on all the omegas, but
right.
About omega-9?
Well, I haven't studied that, folks. Most of the research out there is on omega-3s and 6s, the anti-inflammatories and the pro-inflammatories. So I'm ignorant on that. Sorry.
Okay. Let's see. Can you just give us a quick summary of what can be done to reduce inflammation instead of using the statins and things like that?
A couple of things. Focus on weight loss, because again, the fat increases inflammation. So focus on weight loss. Control your diet. Nutritional supplementation, like the things that we mentioned there. Of course, if you can get a good quality antioxidant, you can get good quality omega-3 fatty acids. Glyconutrients, absolutely, and plant sterols, absolutely. So we're talking about the whole, really, nutritionally, this is the whole 9 yards.
Good. Well, it looks like you've answered most of the questions. We had people typing in fabulous seminar, great seminar, nice artwork, very instructive. So,
thank you very much, folks.
Like you've answered.
What was that?
It looks like you've answered all the questions.
Okay. Well, great. Well, folks, I hope this has been instructive, and we'll let you know what's going on. Hey, by the way, you did send an email talking about the resources we have available right now, right?
Yes. We've added lots of things to our resources. So go check that out on our website, www.buildingstrengthwebinars.com.
Great stuff. Well, thanks, folks, for hanging in with us, and you all have a great night.
Good night.